Welcome to Bookworthy. Today we're talking with author Amy Houts, who has written over 100 books for children, from bath time books to nonfiction and fairy tales. But which of her many books or upcoming projects will be discussed today? We're going a little green as we enter into April for Earth Day. Amy's book, God's Earth is Something to Fight For, is a picture book about God's call to take care of the earth. Through simple prose and multiple verses from the Bible, Amy explains to kids that everyone, all human beings, must work together to save the earth. From writing letters to elected officials to recycling and saving water at home, kids are encouraged to make changes and to ask others to do so as well. Welcome to Bookworthy, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It is my pleasure to have you, Amy, and you have had a lot of books out there, and I'm excited to talk about this one for Earth Day. But to get started, we have to do our random question of the week. So what do you prefer, the beach or the mountains?
I would have to say the beach. I was born in New York, and so we used to go to the beach, and especially like a rocky beach or a sandy beach, and I really loved the seagulls and the waves and just being there with the ocean so vast. It's a beautiful place.
Amazing. I've never heard someone say they love the beach when they're from New York, though, because that's usually, you don't hear about the New York beaches. Florida, was it North Carolina or South Carolina, but I guess New York does have beaches too. Way fun. I always enjoy the beach as well. It's just, again, there's so much you see, and there's something about water that just is a calming effect. Most definitely. Well, Amy, tell us a little bit about your book, Earth is Something to Fight For.
Okay. Well, I wrote this book because I was hearing a lot of news about fires and floods and how the earth was changing and how our weather was changing, and the storms did seem more severe than when I was growing up. And also, I'm married to a retired science teacher, so a lot of conversations revolve around science topics. And also at the same time, we were having grandchildren, and I was thinking, what kind of world are we going to live for them? And are they going to be able to grow up with the same type of enjoyment? Especially one of my grandsons is worried about climate change, something that we never even thought about when we were young. So I wrote a book, I wrote a manuscript, and I submitted it to an SCBWI to have a critique, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And the woman, while she liked the manuscript, she said was not from a faith perspective to begin with. So while she liked it, she said there are so many books out about the climate and about recycling and had back matter, what practical ways you can do. And so I said, well, what if I wrote it from a faith perspective? Because as writers and as people, we see things through through the lens of our faith. And she said, now that has not been done. Well, it's been done, but not to the extent of, the general market. And so I wrote something and submitted it to a few different publishers, and I had two that were interested. And the one where I finally got the contract, Social Impact Books, they had someone read it and wanted me to add more Bible verses, which I was, happy to do. And it became even stronger from a Christian perspective. And it's a persuasive book. It's which I've been told is kind of unusual. And sometimes when you're writing something, you don't really know what it is. You're just putting the words down. And so I talk about kind of the history of, very briefly, God gave us free will, and we learned how to, keep warm and cook food, and all these things that benefit us, but how that caused and is causing the Earth, Earth's atmosphere to change and have too much CO2.
I love that you've taken this need that usually gets a lot of, like you said, attention in the general market, and as Earth Day and Arbor Day and all those things are coming up, but to take it from a faith perspective, that we are stewards of the earth that God gave us, and that we do have to take action, do our part, love the creation that God has made, and to be sure that we are caring for what He has given us, whether that's we're in the city or in the country, and there's always things that we can do. And you've done a great job in this book of making it not a scary topic, because like you said, you had a grandson that was a little worried because there is a bit of fear that is put out in media and even some TV shows about climate change, but to talk about how, the cause and effect, but we can take action. And through was, I think, part of it, you said, worry leads to prayer. It's something we can pray for, because what we care about, God cares about. And I love just taking that perspective on, taking care of our world and just loving the place that God has given us to live, even though it's not perfect, but it is what we have in front of us, and we can glorify God in those actions as well.
Yes, I agree. And not just the fact that we're taking care of the earth, but taking care of the earth means taking care of other people, because a lot of times it's people we don't even know who are caught in the floods or the fires. And people, in the United States, but also globally, that are affected. And a lot of times it's poor people that need our help. And so it is a global problem.
It's definitely a book that helps give kids a global perspective and to look at our world beyond their own home or their school, and to kind of take a sense of how they can impact the world around them. They can have a voice, and they can take action to things that they care about. And I love that you've kind of given tools in your back matter, as well as just kind of throughout the book, just showing that kids can have an opinion for something good, not just with, whether we like peas or not. There are other opinions they could have. And I love how you talk about fighting in the book as well, because I have 3 boys, so fighting usually means fists up, let's go. But, it's not just, not with fists, but with your voice and with your action, with, your time, your talent, and your smiles. I love that element, just to think about, what could I do? How did God create me so that I could impact His creation? So I love that message in your book as well. Now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just reading it over this morning, and I was thinking about that particular part of the book, and how people can come together with their church. Our church has a special, the United Methodist Women. Well, now they're called the United Women of Faith, and that's a special issue for them, is fighting against climate change. And so when I was writing this book and doing the research, I found out that there are the Baptist Church and several of the other churches have taken this issue and are championing, fighting for it. I was so encouraged to see all these faith groups coming together and working to help people and to help change some of the laws, and to, encourage this caring for our.
Definitely. It's one of those that, Christians really, of whatever denomination, are not usually seen in the, political areas as, others when dealing with issues like climate change or many of the other issues in our world. But it's neat to see that there are ways of stepping into those hard spaces with our faith, where we don't have to be combative or, fight with our fists, like you say, but to fight with our actions, to show what we love and what's important to us through, how we vote, how we serve our communities, whether it's locally or globally. And I think it's neat for kids to see that they can have an impact and they can think beyond just their own home. So I love that. Now, if you could communicate just one idea, there's many in this book, but what would you hope kids walk away with from this book?
I would say that the one idea would be that they can make a difference.
Love that. And it's one of those, ideas we all want to make a difference, no matter how old we are. And just to see our world and even, pollution and climate change in a Christian's perspective is definitely different and unique. And I think that there is both a need for books like that as well as a desire for parents to communicate these things to our kids, because they are getting so many messages from school and media to say, let's save the earth, let's combat climate change. But really, those are very large concepts, but you do a great job of putting it into something that is tangible for kids to do, and ways parents can have conversations. And to even, I think one really neat element of your book is that not everybody's going to listen to you. That kind of like, not everybody's going to be welcoming to your ideas. That's a concept that is hard for kids to understand. It's like, but this is what I believe. Why do you believe something different? And it's like that's definitely not normal for that kind of 4 to 8 range of a picture book, but it is relevant because they're, whatever they're feeling and experiencing and finding important to them is going to affect how they communicate with their grandparents, with neighbors, and to know that not everybody does think the same about climate change or even faith. And just to have a way to communicate that we can still love them, we can still step towards them, still communicate with them, and in a respectful way, I think is an element that is a heavy need for kids to understand. I know with my own boys, it's been a constant conversation like, look, you're not going to like everybody, you're not going to agree with everybody, but everybody is made in God's image, which is also another point of your book. So
It's true. And when you mentioned that 4 to 8-year-olds, yes, this book, I'll just show you a picture of it. The artwork is so beautiful that if some of the words are a little too high level for a 4-year-old, that just looking at the pictures is another way that you can get them interested. And that the concepts, I think an 8-year-old would be able to understand, but just the fact that they can look at and see this beautiful artwork and get the basics of what is being said, I think is important too, because it is a complex topic. And I do try to, in the back matter, try to explain what your carbon footprint is on a very basic level. And so it isn't, so that's just something to keep in mind about the book.
And that's kind of the beauty of picture books is, because there's so much development that goes on in the age range that picture books is made for, but the artwork is amazing. And, even if they're not catching on to the concepts in the words, the questions that they ask in regards to pictures just leads to more questions and better understanding. And, you reference, all the Bible verses you kind of mention or quote or referenced in there, and that just leads to, let's go look in the Bible and let's double check this. And, it's really a great book of just exploring. And, whether they're young and can't quite get those, little brother can't quite get those concepts, or big sister is like eating it up. But it's a great book just to kind of continue to have that conversation about climate change, about stewarding our world well, and, a little bit of why there are certain storms or flooding, why there are these things that happen in our world is just a great conversation starter for sure. Now, Amy, did you always want to be an author?
I didn't. I really didn't.
Really?
My,
With over 100 books, you didn't think you would be an author?
no. My mother was a preschool teacher, and so I always grew up thinking I wanted to be a preschool teacher, and I did try it for a year and found out that I liked writing for preschoolers better than teaching them. But I really didn't, really wasn't on my radar until our older daughter, who's now in her 40s, was a baby, and I was at home with her. And she would take these long 3-hour naps in the afternoon. And when I got my housework done that I needed to, I wanted to do something that, that would be fun and would help me, being at home and being alone, something I could do there. I did sew and bake and do all of those things, but I wanted to do something with my mind that was challenging. And my mother had always written poetry and had written one picture book when I was older. And so I asked her some questions and just started writing and found that I really loved it. I started out with magazine little stories and poems and activities. And then my first picture book here was an ABC Christmas from Standard Publishing, and that was in the 1990s. And from then, that was my own idea, but most of my 100+ titles have been written on assignment, which was something else I didn't even know that that writers did. So I've worked with a lot of educational publishers, and they give me the topic, the word count, different, a team to work with, to bounce ideas off of. And so that's the majority of my work. But I love also, of course, writing my own ideas and having them published.
That's very fun. And I love how God has just kind of moved you in that direction and allowed you to, I'm sure with your husband being a science teacher, that, those kind of conversations were, it kind of helped keep you in that constant thinking phase to always have some sort of idea or a project to work on. So that's lots of fun. Now, what is your favorite book that you have written? I know it's hard, but
that I've written. Oh dear.
Or the most interesting project.
The most interesting. Well, I could say the most interesting project, which was an assignment of retelling 60 fairy tales, was the most interesting project I've worked on. Oh, and it was over 6 months. And I worked for a publisher from South Korea, called Compass Publishing. And so they gave me a list of, it wasn't just fairy tales, it was folk tales and some classic books to rewrite for young children so that they could understand them. And I worked back and forth with an editor who actually was British. So he worked for this, and he lives in South Korea, but he worked for this educational publisher, and we worked back and forth to get it just right. And I absolutely loved rereading fairy tales and folk tales that I'd read in my childhood and then retelling them so that young children could understand them and help them learn how to read and help them learn English.
What is it? I've done a retelling of Red Riding Hood as one of my children's books, and so I love retellings and I love the fairy tales and folk tales that we've grown up with and how powerful they are into our hearts. And I love that you've done that for kids in South Korea as well, to give them those tools, because there is so much that we learn from a fairy tale. Just empathy and resilience, and so many great tools that those good old stories share with us for sure. Now, what has been the most impactful book in your life, Amy, other than the Bible?
Oh, other than the Bible.
I know.
Well, when you sent me the questions, I was going to talk about the Bible, and I wanted to tell you why. and then I'll think of another book.
Okay.
I grew up in a Jewish family and didn't read the Bible, didn't go to church or temple until someone gifted me a Bible when I was 18 years old. And that book changed my life. I mean, that was when, after I read it, and I read it cover to cover, I decided that Jesus was the Son of God. I mean, I had grown up with, even though we didn't go to temple, we celebrated Jewish holidays, and my family, an extended family, are all Jewish. And so I decided that even though Jewish people don't believe that Jesus is the Messiah, everything I read about totally changed my life.
I think that was a very impactful book. Yes.
It was the most impactful book in my life.
Most definitely. I love how God's word can do that. Whether no matter your history or family that you grew up in, God can reveal himself and transform hearts and minds through his word.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, other than the Bible.
Other than the Bible, I would have to say I love the book. When I was growing up, I loved A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And I don't write fantasy, but it's just this wonderful fantasy that kind of brings science and science fiction together with a girl and looking for her father who's been lost. And I always have remembered that book I think it was kind of a transition between being a young child and growing up. And I always kind of think of that book as kind of in that transition period when I was kind of a higher level thinking too. So I would say that book had a lot of impact in my life.
Wrinkle in Time is definitely one of those books that kind of can mark a childhood for sure. I read it recently and I was shocked at how many Bible verses were in there. And it was kind of one of those like, oh, these are Bible verses like woven into this science fiction story. And I was very impressed. I was like, I need to read more of her things. But it's a very good book. But yeah, it is one of those unique books that kind of merges both faith and science and accepting ourselves and being willing to step out and believe in ourselves too, which is just a message that's great for any age. Well, Amy, what can we expect next from you?
Bushel and Peck, the publisher who published my God's Earth is Something to Fight For, I've worked with them on a few different projects. So the next book coming out is called Where Did the Bible Come From? And so I did a lot of research for this. It was so interesting. It's for a little older age group, so it's for the 7 to 10-year-olds. And it's got lots of facts, and it talks about not only who wrote it, where did they write it, what are the books in the Bible, how are they different, when did the format of the Bible change through the ages. And so that is coming out next year.
That's exciting. I love that topic. I recently did an article on the Geneva Bible, and I think my eyeballs just nearly popped out of my head just learning a little bit more about the history of the Bibles that we have. And it is a fascinating subject to see not just how many people were involved in it, how it stood the test of time, and just continued to impact hearts and cultures across the world. So that sounds like a very neat project. I can't wait to see more of it. Now, where can people find out more about you and your books, Amy?
So I have a website. It's my name, amyhouts.com. And my name is spelled AMYHOUTS. And then my handle for X and Instagram and Threads is just my name, at Amy Houts.
Easy to find for sure. We'll make sure it's linked in the descriptions as well. Thank you for joining us today, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
It's been fun for sure. And thank you for joining Amy and me on this episode of the BookWorthy Podcast. Check the show notes for any books or links that we discussed, and let us know in the comments if you prefer the beach or the mountains. Now, next week, BookWorthy will be going on break to prep for the next season. But don't worry, we'll be replaying a few of our past episodes so you don't miss us too much. We'll be back with new episodes soon. Happy reading!